Let's talk about 3ds Max displacement, using it in your scene, issues which you run into. I've used it here on this wall, I've used it on the floor, and I've used it on the ceiling. I'm trying to show you that you can use displacement. It doesn't have to be a problem. It doesn't have to crash your scene. It doesn't have to use up loads of memory. And yes, if you have a large scene with lots of different items in, which is already using up a lot of memory, then yeah, you might need quite a bit of memory to render everything out, but that wouldn't change just because of displacement. You can use it, you can see it here, and when I click render with these walls going, bear in mind this is a room, so if I look here, this is my scene. I've got walls, I've got ceiling, I've got floor, I've got behind the camera going as well as in front of the camera, which obviously you wouldn't need. You could just have the walls which you see in your scene, but the point is all of this is displacing right now. We've also used it in the office on an apartment block. It's like a 15-20 story apartment block. And he rendered the whole thing out with bricks and displacement. And it didn't crash, it didn't use a ton of resources, it just worked. Let's talk about the settings, because you're probably looking at this because you have issues with displacement and you want to know what's going on and how to fix them. So let's get into how to fix them quickly. I'm using V-Ray. I'm pretty sure if I use the material displacement without V-Ray, I've got a V-Ray displacement modifier here on top. This is the inner walls. Now, if I didn't have this and used the material, I'd need to change the settings in the material. But what I've done, if I open the material editor by pressing M, so we've got various materials here. Now, I've got displacement, plug it in here. If you double click on the bitmap, you can click view image. So this is the displacement you're seeing on the floor. Displacement on the walls. Now you see this is blurry, like if you look here at the bump, that's not blurry. That's got all the details. But if you do this in displacement, you get a mess. You get the darks going down, the lights coming up, it just looks and is messy. What have we got? This is the clay ceiling. And displacement here. I don't know, here we go. Displacement here. Again is blurry. So you're going to need to do that in Photoshop. I mean, you can really take the bump, which looks like this. I'm going to right click here on this and say reveal location in Explorer. It's right there. If I open that, open with Adobe Photoshop. So with this image, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. About, if you leave it, if you see 1 pixel, you still get those darks and those lights. 2 starts to go away. 3, we need it to really go away. So 5. There you go. Click OK. Now I'm going to put a curves on this. I want these darks to be darker and the lights to be lighter. So I clicked up here on the curve. I'm going to click on this line and drag down, and that will make the darks darker. And click here and make click up. Sorry. Okay, sometimes this does the opposite to what you expect. Like normally that would make the darks darker and that would make the lights lighter. However, in this case, if you click image, if it does the opposite, it's because you've got image mode, and you'll see that set to grayscale. So if that was RGB color, then it would be doing what it should be doing. If it was CMYK, it might be doing something else as well, but it's set to grayscale, and that's why you've got this weird thing going on. Like if I go here, image, mode, RGB color, don't measure layers. So now that's RGB color. If I turn this on, let's do another one so you can see. This will make the darks darker, and that will make the lights lighter. But when it's on grayscale, it tends to flip it. And I've had CMYK flip it as well. So just so you know what's happening. And that's the map which you can use for your displacement. But you need to have it blurry. I'll show you what it looks like if you don't. So we've got this material. Here we've got all of these bumps. So we're going to put this straight into displacement instead of this blurred image. Okay, then we're going to click over here on the last V-Ray frame buffer. Okay, we're going to do a region of this and see what happens. If you look at the task manager, you can see how much memory is being used. I've got 32 gig memory in this machine, so 3ds Max is using 14 gig. Okay, so this is rendered out now, and I've assigned the new render to A and the old render to B. You just click on here and you click A, and this one you click B. So this is the new render. See how this brick's kind of destroyed? This is with it blurry. This is without it blurry. This is this one with the blur on it. That's without the blur on it. So what happens is without the blur, you destroy the bricks. It picks up all those bits, the lights and the darks, and it tries to push them up and down and up and down. We do another region over here. You'll see this better with the lighting going on, or the lights falling directly on it. So you see this? I've got pockmarked rocks everywhere. That's with it blurry. The rocks look nice and even and proper. And without it blurry, they just look destroyed. Marks all over them, and it's just a mess. So when you're doing your displacement maps, blur them. Unless, of course, you're doing floors, and then you don't want to blur them very much. Now, let's just get this material back looking proper. We're going to get that into displacement. Okay. Now, let's just quickly talk about these triplanar textures. So, here I've got the bitmap, and here I've got the triplanar texture. So this bitmap comes in, and it's set use real world scale. And this, I've got this set to size 1 mil and blend 1. So this in essence is telling it to just use Y1. It's saying use this one. Don't look here for the size. Look here. So it's looking here and using this size. So that's what the 1 is. And then I've set that blend to 1. Because it's a displacement. By default it's 0.1. So I've made that 1. And then these are exactly the same. And all these maps come in through these. So, and this is the diffuse going in through the same thing as well. The reason I have the triplanar texture is it blends on corners, it blends on curves, which is what you want to be seeing. See here? I mean, you can unwrap it, sure, and you'll get a better finish because those rocks are just kind of merging together. But it's blurring. I told it to blur. So it's blurring corners. It's blending the texture. Here it's blended around the corner. And that's why I've used triplanar texture. If I don't use triplanar texture, this will become a mess. I'll show you here. Do a region of that. It's just without the triplanar, I'm just going to bypass this. Bypass. Okay. No triplanar. Right, see without triplanar I get this sharp edge here. And that just looks wrong. Just doesn't work. So instead of having that, I get that. It blends it together. Without triplanar, with triplanar. So you can see what I'm trying to achieve. Okay. Just going to press Control Z a few times, get these back. There we go. Alright, so that's what I have on this wall. Now let's cover a couple of other things. First off, if you don't have enough memory, you can try this. You've got Embry here, and you've got Conserve Memory. Now I've had this ticked off for the renders, so if we put that on, and we're just going to take another region, take a slightly large one. I don't want to render the whole thing, but let's see how much memory this now uses with Conserve Memory on. Okay, so that went up to just over 13 gig. So now it's 12,791. So it's saving almost 2 gig of memory by having Conserve Memory on. 1.5 gig of memory. So that still saves memory, saves resources. You can use those for something else. Okay, the other thing we're going to do is try turning this off and use Embry off. Now, sometimes Max crashes when you turn off use Embry and you render, so let's see what happens. Okay, so that went up to 13 gig. This is with using Embry turned off. It went up to 13 gig, but then for the actual rendering, it's only using 7. That's, what, 6 or 7 gig of memory less than it was using before. So yes, Embry uses a lot of memory. It can speed things up. It does usually speed things up. But if you turn it off, you can save a lot of memory and a lot of resources. If you don't need to turn it off, leave it on and click Conserve Memory. Alright. A couple other things with this scene. If you look at these walls, T for top, P for perspective, Z for zoom, zoom to extents. Alright, let's talk about this mesh and how it was made. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so simple edit poly. I haven't done the outside walls and having those because you don't see them in any of the views. Don't be putting V-ray displacement on stuff you're not going to see that's going to use extra resources and your computer's going to crash. So this is a brick wall, so I've got chamfer set fairly high. I've got a quad chamfer set at 50 mil with 3 segments set at 0.5. This 0.5, if you look, it goes sharper and it's up. And segments goes up and up. 3 is enough. I don't want to go too high because the displacement's also trying to subdivide and everything. Now I've got a subdivide on here and I've set it to 200. I could try 150. That might use less memory. I've set this at 200 and just left it at that. If you don't have subdivide, or you don't have a mesh which is already subdivided, let's take a pillow for example. A pillow normally has lots of boxes. That's fine. That's going to work with displacement. If you don't have something which is already in small sections, you need to subdivide it, or your memory use is just going to go out the roof. I've got a UV map on here and I've got a V-ray displacement mod. So the V-ray displacement modifier, I've said click down here, use object material. So I don't need to put the map in here. I've set it, the amount here, to 100 millimeters. So I want it to come out by 100 millimeters. I don't have it shifting back. Sometimes you do, but with these edges, that's probably going to be odd. So basically, anything that's 100 mil in front of these walls is going to get hit by that bricks coming out. So make sure there's space around the walls. Then I've got keep continuity, which by default is off. Make sure that's on, and right click on this spinner on the edge threshold, get that down to 0.001. Those are the changes which you need to make. This is something else which you need to keep an eye on. If you're using too much memory, increase the number, 10. That should be, I wouldn't particularly go higher than that unless you really feel you need to. If you lower this, you're going to be using a lot more memory. But at the same time, if you look at the render, if I click here on the V-ray frame buffer, see this floor? This floor has all these jagged edges, and those jagged edges are caused by this pixels being at 4. So if I set that to 3, then those jagged edges should disappear. So let's try that. got that region on, I'm going to click on it, displacement modifier. I set that to 10, so that's coming up 10 mil. I'm going to change this to 3. Let's see how much more memory it uses. Now I'm worried the computer might crash. I've got Conserve Memory on, I've got Use Memory. This is possible with this set to 3. It's going to use an extra 10 gig or so of memory. It's possible it won't, but it's possible that it will. Okay, well that's a relief. It's using the same amount of memory it was using with Conserve Memory unchecked. It's using about an extra gig of memory, if I remember right. That's not so bad. Okay. So let's save this one out. And let's go for this one A, and the next one B. Okay, let's zoom in here. So this is with 4 pixels, and this is with 3. You see the difference? There's quite a difference in the jaggedness. And if needed, you can lower it further. I wouldn't want to. I'd leave it there. Just because I know Max might crash on you. But yeah, you can push it further. These are really the tricks and tips if you're going to be using displacement. If you've got V-Ray, use V-Ray Displacement Modifier. I just leave it on 3D mapping. Set in your amount. If you're going to shift it back, let's say if I've got a flat brick wall, then I'll absolutely shift it back. I'll have the bricks coming out 5 mil, and then the normal operating procedure is you do half. Sorry, you do half minus 2.5. And that shifts the wall back minus 2.5 mil before it starts to displace. In this case, I'm leaving it at 0. Edge length, if you have those pixels, you can reduce this amount and you'll get rid of those pixels, but it will use more memory because it's dividing the geometry up even more. And I use object material, but I don't always use object material. Sometimes I uncheck this and I have my material editor, and I don't have displacement in here. And I don't have to, and I'll just take displacement here and I'll put that directly over here into the text map. And then that should be doing the same thing. So that's the tips and tricks with displacement, really. You've got your material. You want to make sure that your displacement map is blurred. You don't want to be doing it with a non-blurred image. You don't want to be doing it just taking the bump. You can just take the bump and blur it, but you don't want to do it just with a bump. Let's see what it looks like with brick. Okay. I got it set at 100 mil for the walls. Let's set it at, this is brick, not rocks. Let's set it at 15 mil. That's still a lot. Okay, so that's bricks. Now here you can see I don't have V-Ray triplanar texture on, and it's just cutting it here. But if you come over here where the light is, you can see the shadows. That's at 15 mil, so these bricks are sticking out 1.5 centimeters. You can increase it if you want, but that's about accurate. And that was using about approximately the same amount of memory as when we did the brick wall. I mean, when we did the stone wall. Okay. I've got one more scene to show you. Right, this is the scene we did the seamless brick texture on, or no tiling brick texture. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the same scene, and I'm going to show you that you can put displacement on an entire block of flats. So the first thing which we want to do is subdivide this. And I'm going to say about 150. This is from previous tests. 150 normally works good. Then we put a V-Ray displacement modifier. And we're going to say use object material. Make sure that edge length is set to 4. We can have it come out at 40 millimeters. And right click that, keep continuity on. Now as far as the material itself goes, in the last tutorial I talked about creating these images and blurring them. So that's what we've done, and we're going to use that multi-texture into the mercantile. Make sure these two are both set the same and set that into the displacement slot. Displacement's there. So let's see how much memory this uses. $2 gig. 2.6 gig of memory to render a block of flats with displacement. And that's what I'm talking about. You can use displacement in your scene. You can put it there. If you understand the tips and tricks, you can make it work. So that's it. Rendered with displacement. And we're just going to do another view. I just want you to, hopefully you can see the effect of the displacement here better. So there we have it. You can render a tower block with displacement. I'm not saying you should. I'm not saying to do it. I'm saying it's possible. So this displacement is a tool which you have, which you need to be able to be using. So you don't necessarily want to use it all the time, but when you do want to use it, you need to be able to. It can be very important on cushions, it can be important on wood, it can be important on carpets, it can be important on a number of things. The tips and tricks how you use it are simple. You subdivide, you put it there. You can use V-Ray triplanar texture if it goes around corners. You want to curve those corners and have them smooth around there. You don't want to be having jagged edges. You want your smoothing groups to be done properly. You want to be having keep continuity checked. You want your edge threshold to be as low as it possibly can be. If you need to use less memory, you can click on use embry. Sorry, you can turn that off, or you can put conserve memory on. Either way, you're now going to be using less memory. That's the basics. That's how simple it is to use displacement in a 3ds Max scene.